I knew Jack for about, I don't know, maybe 40 years. I knew Jack personally for that long, but I had really known him almost all my life. Read his books, learned to recognize his style, whether he signed or not, and always thought of him, and I still do to this very day, and I think I always will, as the warrior god of comics. My place? An interesting thing about Jack is that while he was an extremely congenial individual, and I've seen this happen over and over again, but one of the reasons that I love to visit Jack and Roz and the family, the kids, was because they made you part of their life. If they liked you, you became a member of the Kirby family. They were Jews, and they were very warm and embracing. And if they fancied you, there's nothing that they wouldn't do for you. They'd put you up overnight, they'd feed you, clothe you, they'd probably buy your car if you needed it, just to get you the hell out of there in a week.
Didn't you tell me that Jack personally made you sandwiches? You're like, here's a Kirby creation.
I think the first time I met Jack, he was living on Long Island, and I drove out to spend some time with him. And it was a summer afternoon, early in the afternoon, summer afternoon. And I pulled up in his driveway. He had a kind of very quaint, not exactly a Tudor house, but it was one that had a cottage kind of quality to it. It wasn't austere and modern, it wasn't Art Deco. It wasn't stone and chrome. It was a very warm, livable place. And I remember pulling up in the driveway, and this guy came out of the door to greet me. And it wasn't it wasn't the bellman. This was Jack himself. Came out to greet me in the parking lot. And we came into the kitchen early. It was early in the afternoon, and Jack said, "Would you like something to eat?" And I said, "I'm okay, Jack." And he said, "No, come on, let's have lunch." Am I going to argue with Jack Kirby about lunch? I said, "What's for lunch, Jack?" And he said, "Whatever you like." And I said, "Well, what's easy to get on the table?" And he said, "I'll tell you what. I'll make us some cheese sandwiches." And damned if he didn't toast a couple of cheese sandwiches while I'm watching, Kirby create. There he is at the stove, frying up a couple of cheese sandwiches.
And when it gets nice and toasty, you get that Kirby crackle on it.
Then 5 years later, the rest of the industry started making cheese sandwiches.
Kirby crackle came out of it. And I'll tell you what really knocked me out. Over the kitchen table was the original cover to Prize Comics it was an American Indian strip. Help me out, anybody.
American Eagle?
That might have been American Eagle.
That Severin also worked on?
It was a Johnny Severin cover, but absolutely magnificent, of this thing with a huge headdress. Huge. And you knew it was in red, white, blue. Not here, it was in black and white. It was the original. But I had collected those comic books when I was a kid. And so, while Jack and I ate our cheese sandwiches, American Eagle was looking down on us, giving us his blessings. And I'm thinking, wow, what a way to start a Kirby day. eat your hearts out. Well, Jack said, he said, come on down to the studio. Let me show you some stuff down there. The studio was in the basement. You thought maybe, like I did, that it would be in like a tower, you know? Maybe 3 or 4 stories high, made of like marble.
Marble and alabaster. The angels sing when he draws.
Jack had the basement, near the stove, near the heater. And he had an entire setup, his drawing board and his reference materials and his art stuff and so forth. But I was really knocked out because on the stairway down to the basement, down to his studio, were a number of Kirby double pages that he had colored, including one of my favorites from the series Boys Ranch. You know Boys Ranch? In the middle of every Boys Ranch, there was a Kirby spectacular, action spectacular. And on this one, this particular one, he did the classic Western saloon fight scene. I mean, you know, there was mirrors being smashed and beer mugs being hurled around and figures jumping over the bar and a piano player in a corner. You know, he just wasn't, he'd been through all this before. He'd seen these barroom brawls. He was just knocking out rhythm. And as Jack walked by, smoking this 2-inch long stogie, he commented on it. He said, "There's a little fight scene." Kirby was a master of understatement. But it was an interesting thing about him. I believe that you can divide the entire creative world into 2 areas. Whether it's musicians, or singers, or actors, or architects, or comic book creators, I think all of them fall into one of 2 areas. 2 areas. Intuitive and analytical. Jack was intuitive. And I've seen this happen numerous times. Jack would sit down and without a moment's hesitation, no pausing, he'd begin to work on the top left panel immediately. He didn't have to think about it. It was intuitive. You get my drift? Intuitive. On the other hand, I'm analytical. I have to figure it out. Jack could not articulate anything about his work because it was intuitive. He couldn't define it. But if he liked you and you asked him a question, "Hey Jack, why did you do this way on this panel? You know, I really loved it." Jack was such a warm and congenial person that he tried to please you. And he'd begin to make up an explanation that often went something like, the gods were with me that day, and I was thinking of flying saucers of, gods from Mars, and they inspired me to get, he'd begin just making it up, rambling along. On the other hand, if you ask me that question, I can tell you precisely what every single line is on that page. Jack couldn't do that. If you wanted to find out why Kirby did anything, you had to talk to Roz, his wife. Roz was analytical. And she was the one who held the details. And if anybody knew, she would know. So if you needed to find out anything specific, like names, dates, places, you had to talk to Roz. And she was very charming and very beautiful too. Kirby's visiting the Kirbys was a fantastic experience. I watched Jack draw many times. He ultimately moved out to California, Thousand Oaks. I remember when I first visited him out there, he took me out on the back patio, and it was a vista. He was up on the kind of the side of a mountain, and you could see 20 miles in the distance. Spectacular, breathtaking. And Jack pointed into a spot long ways away, and he said, "You see that area right over there, Jim?" He said, "They are launching missiles to the moon from that site." And I thought, how fitting that America's arguably premier science fiction fantasy creator would be perched on that mountainside by a missile site within, driving, walking distance. Sometimes it works out that way. Where are we at?